Hi, my name is Zan Cancel, and my final project is on detection honeybees. What are detection honeybees? Detection honeybees are trained to detect specific odors or substances through conditioning processes such as proboscis extension reflex, or PER. In these training procedures, honeybees are exposed to a target odor paired with a reward or punishment. Over time, they learn to associate the odor with the consequence and exhibit a conditioned response when exposed to the odor alone. How do honeybees smell? Honeybees primarily smell using their antennae, which are finely tuned vapor sensors capable of detecting odor molecules at extremely low concentrations. When an odor molecule binds to receptors on sensory neurons located in the sensilla on their antennae, it triggers a neural response that is transmitted to the brain, where it is then interpreted as a specific smell. Their tongues, also known as proboscis, are primarily used for feeding on nectar and are not directly involved in the sense of smell. However, honeybees can be trained to extend their proboscis in response to certain odors as part of a conditioning process. This conditioned process, known as proboscis extension reflex, or PER, as I mentioned before, can be used in various applications. In such cases, honeybees are trained to extend their tongues or proboscis in response to the presence of whatever they need to detect, making them effective biosensing working animals. Honeybees can detect explosives, infectious diseases, and drugs. How do honeybees detect explosives? In a study by Filippi et al., they used honeybees to detect explosives on landmines. They underwent a conditioning process that involved presenting honeybees with TNT as a target odor along with a food reward, in this case, sugar syrup. By repeatedly exposing the honeybees to the target odor along with a food reward, they learned to associate that odor with the reward, similar to how they naturally associate flower odors with nectar. When the honeybees detect TNT, they stick out their proboscis, or PER. Once the honeybee colonies were successfully conditioned to associate the target odor with the food reward, they were deployed in the field to search for the odor of explosives, in this case, landmines. Filippi et al. Used detection patterns that were monitored using cameras. These patterns were analyzed to detect honeybee presence and localize potential landmine sites. Here you can see the landmine sites, and on the right are the cameras that show where the honeybees were. Here's a photo from a study done by the Los Alamos National Laboratory. In this box are detection honeybees. Here, the bees are detecting whether or not explosives are in the car. Honeybees are able to detect explosives on people, cars, checkpoints, and even over water. How do honeybees detect infectious diseases? In a study by Contos et al., they used honeybees to detect SARS-CoV-2, or COVID. Bees were collected and harnessed in experiments. Throat swabs from COVID-infected and healthy minks were used as odor samples. The bees were rewarded with sugar syrup after smelling COVID-infected odor samples. Honeybees were able to effectively detect COVID-infected samples based on odor discrimination. They would stick out their proboscis, or PER, when COVID was detected. Lastly, honeybees are able to detect drugs. In a study by Scott et al., they trained honeybees to be able to detect drugs like heroin and cocaine. Here, honeybees were trained to detect drugs using a process called negative conditioning, where the bees were trained to associate the scent of a drug with a negative stimulus. In this case, the negative stimulus was an electric shock. These honeybees were exposed to different odors. The odors included the drug scent and a control scent. When exposed to drugs and a negative stimulus, the bees would have an avoidant behavior. Through this conditioning process, the bees learn to avoid the scent of drugs to avoid the negative experience. The use of honeybees for detection have many advantages, including their sensitivity to smell, their size because they're very small, they're unobtrusive compared to dogs, they're inexpensive to maintain and inexpensive to train, and they're self-reproducing. One ethical issue associated with honeybees for detection purposes is the potential harm or stress caused to the bees during training. While honeybees are less obtrusive and invasive compared to other detection methods, like detection dogs, there is still a concern for the well-being of the bees involved. As you can see in the photo above, the honeybee is strapped and taped down in a lab. This is far from its natural environment. Some may argue the benefits of using honeybees for detection, such as their low cost, portability, and effectiveness, outweigh the potential harm to individual bees. However, on the other hand, there are ethical considerations that may arise about the training process. It is clear that honeybees undergo uncomfortable conditions during training. Some key messages to take away from this presentation include that honeybees are highly effective detection tools that can be trained to detect a wide range of substances, including explosives, infectious diseases like COVID-19, and drugs like heroin and cocaine. Another message to take away is that the primary method of detection used by honeybees is their finely tuned antennae, which are capable of detecting odor molecules at extremely low concentrations, making them highly sensitive biosensors. Overall, honeybees can be valuable working animals for detection as they are inexpensive to maintain, train, and reproduce.